I think we all know as golfers, once it gets its hooks in you, you've got no chance. You just fall in love with the game. Golf's got centuries of history. The people who play the game are so varied and, across all walks of life. And it's just so ripe to talk about people and culture.
I'm Mason Reed, and this is Invested in the Game, an original podcast from Charles Schwab. Each episode, we tell the story of remarkable people who have committed their time, resources, and emotional energy into making golf the wonderful and sometimes maddening game that it is. On today's episode, we're speaking with Brendon Thomas. Brendon is the founder and publisher of the Golfer's Journal and its membership platform, which is called Broken Tee Society. What Brendon did with Golfer's Journal is completely counter to everything that was seen in golf media before 2017. He created a beautiful journal worthy of sitting on a high-end coffee table without golf instruction, without pro golfer features, and without, wait for it, uninspiring advertising on every other page. Instead, the Golfer's Journal decided there was a market for a high aesthetic and rich storytelling. And Brendon launched this at the very moment everyone was saying print was dead. I talk with Brendon about how he pulled ideas from his previous world, surfing, into the golf media space, how they've grown an almost cult-like following, and what it's like to be the hunted versus the hunter, now that they've had so much success. Hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Brendon Thomas, welcome to Invested in the Game. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about the Golfer's Journal. We'll talk about the Broken Tee Society. We're going to talk a lot of things golf, but it seems like it'll be impossible for us to do that without talking about surfing because it's sort of woven in to the journey and to your own personal story. Tell us about the Surfer magazine and your journey into publishing, into a little bit of the things that happened before Golfer's Journal came to be.
Yeah, it's now a long sordid history. I was a surf journalist. I'm using air quotes in the journalist sense because I, wasn't formally trained as a journalist, but we just, I wrote for Surfer magazine back when I lived in South Africa and various other sports publications and culture publications. But I eventually got a call up to go and be the managing editor of Surfer magazine, which is when I moved to the United States. I think that was back in 2007. And the job entailed obviously running the day-to-day of the magazine, but it also involved taking trips all over the world to some of the best surf locations in the world. And coincidentally, there's a lot of great golf courses in all these places. Surfing, especially on the competitive side, is a strange one. The competitions are set up where there's long waiting periods where they wait for the ideal swell conditions to show up. So you'd have a 2-week waiting period and sometimes only 3 days of surfing. So you had a lot of downtime, and a lot of the pro surfers were just look to kill time. They're insanely competitive. They would go out and golf on the down days, and we just jump on the bandwagon. And I was a competent golfer, probably more competent than most of the guys on tour because I played as a kid, but it wasn't something that I was practicing or actively engaged in. But just that experience of going out with different groups of people and seeing the game as an adult was really eye-opening, and I just fell in love with it, as we all did. I mean, the surfers were all obsessed with it, and then every winter on the North Shore of Oahu, we would go out and I became the editor of Surfer magazine. We put on a big awards show on the North Shore every year, the Surfer Poll. And we'd go out to the North Shore of Oahu, and Turtle Bay would offer this deal for all the surfers where you could pay $500 and you were unlimited golf for the whole surf season. So we would spend a lot of time playing golf, and we just got obsessed with it.
Why do you think surfers were attracted to golf beyond just needing to kill some time waiting for these events and the weather to cooperate? What was it about the game? Because it does, I think to somebody not as familiar with it, it would seem, a little bit like an odd couple.
Absolutely. I think we all know as golfers, once it gets its hooks in you, you've got no chance. You just fall in love with the game. It's infuriating and beautiful and all the things we've heard before. But I think from a surf perspective, it's kind of a tired trope at this point, talking about the similarities and kind of in the pursuits. There's the physical movements of surfing is, kind of synchronizing hips and shoulders and reading the conditions and doing all that stuff is there's a lot of like crossover. And I think for surfers specifically, when you're kind of reacting to this dynamic playing field all the time, and especially for these great surfers, they can achieve a sort of mastery over it. And then they go and stand over a static golf ball and it just won't listen to them. You know?
Right. They have to get out of their head and all these other things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're used to kind of performing on a dynamic playing field. And then you get over this ball and you're just like, why does it not do what we're asking it to do? And I think that for competitive people, for athletic people, that is just an infuriating thing. And then, you hit one great shot and you think you can do it 1,000 times over. I mean, the amount of times I've heard that either pro surfers or people in my previous industry saying, I'm going to make the Champions Tour.
They're convinced they can make the Champions Tour?
Absolutely. And I was one of them. I was like, okay, this is something that if I practice enough, I'm athletic enough, I can totally do this. You realize at a certain point how far away how good those guys actually are. But I've heard that trope from everyone. And it's pretty funny. I mean, guys become scratch golfers and all the rest, but they just still, there's a chasm between what they're doing and what the top players are doing.
That's fantastic. What do you think? So golf is interesting in that it's very difficult to blame anyone else if you play poorly. Conversely, if you play well, you pretty much have yourself to thank for that. It's not like tennis or most other sports where you could show up at Wimbledon, play the best you've ever played, and the other person may just play better than you. What's this competitive surfing equivalent? Can you have your best day ever and just the luck of the draw with a wave? Or is like, how much is within your control? Do people get out of a surf competition and say, can they blame a bunch of other things that were not them?
For sure. I think that's part of what makes golf attractive is that it's so cut and dry. You put a score down at the end of the day and there's no arguing that. Whereas in professional surfing, so much of it is subjective. The judge's perception of how you rode the wave, they assign a score. It's almost like figure skating, right? You go and you do your routine and the judges assign a score to what you did. So it's almost not set up to be competitive, if we're being honest about pro surfing. And I mean, we can probably transition into why the Surfers Journal exists and the Golfers Journal exists. It's like the sport is so much more than the competitive aspect of it. And in surfing especially, it's performance art. And a lot of that has to do with, luck of getting the right waves, the right time, the time of the day your heat is at, who your competitor is, how the judges saw your performance. And the best to do it are actually like performers rather than athletes. They create drama, suspense, they do things at the right time. And really the judges can't help but get swept up in the emotion of it all.
What happened after Surfer Magazine that started to change the trajectory, at least for you, within your career and some of the opportunities that you were seeing out there?
Yeah, I came from a traditional sports background, playing rugby and cricket and all the rest of it. And so much of my surf writing in the beginning was about competitive aspects of the game. But when I took over as editor of Surfer Magazine, there was a sort of like crash course in culture. Surfer Magazine really created surf culture. And I realized that, the magazine was more about the people and the places surfing takes you than it is about what happened while riding a wave. That wasn't always the case for me. Obviously, I learned that. I came to appreciate just how much more entertaining that is from a consumer standpoint and from, a creative standpoint. And when I looked at the golf space, there were like little hints of that appearing here and there, but overall, the media landscape was so much more about the competitive space. And, golf's got centuries of history. The people who play the game are so varied and, across all walks of life. And it's just so right to talk about people and culture. And so that became sort of the lens through which I viewed the whole project. It was like, we don't need to go and chase birdies and bogeys and talk about what's happening on tour. There's so much more to the game. And then it kind of reflected when I finally realized I wasn't going to make the Champions Tour. Golf was still taking me to these incredible places. Every time I got on the tee box with new people, I met someone who was amazing and interesting. And so it actually was like, this is not just an editorial angle. This is like the actual reality for most people.
So you're observing what's going on around golf. When was the moment that you thought about a business opportunity, or you thought there's something that we could build to reflect this? When did that start to percolate in your head that maybe there's something different that can be done here from a media standpoint?
I pitched a golf magazine to the parent company of Surfer Magazine back when I was editing that. So it was a long time coming. I really saw from a cultural perspective, I don't think my idea back then was as refined as it is now, but there was a sort of like younger generation of golfers coming through. And I thought, being in the surf space where so much of culture at that time was defined by surf culture, I felt like I had kind of a couple steps ahead of what I knew a few years in advance what would be cool in golf because I was working in surf. So I pitched an idea, it got shot down immediately, and I kind of left it at that, but it never kind of went dormant.
What was their reaction, or why was it so like, yeah, no, we're just, golf isn't what we do? What was their reaction to that?
So much of it was about, digital media and about advertising and all that sort of stuff, where the vision I've had was always just like, I don't want to rely on advertisers to make this thing. I want to make, a product that is worth purchasing and make the product versus the audience the product. So a lot of it was about how these trying to upend the subscription business model of a traditional media kind of entity. And so the parent company had 50 magazines, and they all sold as many ads as they could in every issue. And it was like a whole, advertising game.
Was that more of the pitch? Like when you said that, was it this interesting angle in golf? How much of it was that versus, I believe we can create something that has a separate model than the one that has been in existence for a long time that you all have, created 50 magazines around?
It kind of evolved. Again, in the beginning, it was just like, I have a point of view that I think is unique and I think we can make a great magazine. But then I was like, we want to make a great magazine. It needs to be beautiful when you pick it up. The paper needs to be great, all the rest of it. And then there was pushback there because it was like, we want to do it cheaply. We'll use this cheap paper and we'll fill it with ads. And it became, the minute it started watering down the idea, I was kind of like, this is not the right place for it. And obviously, thankfully, it didn't take place in that environment.
Was the movement and the writing on the wall, at least for that model, not your current one, but for that model, because I don't know what year, are we talking about the early 2010s or mid 2010s or somewhere in that neighborhood?
Yeah, mid 2010s probably. Okay. Yeah, early 2010s.
And so they knew by that point that things were changing, but they still had probably a pretty decent ad revenue out of those print publications, even still at that point, right? But did they know it was a little shaky at that point?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think all of traditional media was going through a massive sea change at that point. I felt personally that the writing was on the wall. You could see that advertisers were going direct to their consumers. They were starting their own kind of social media channels and all the rest of it. And it was becoming more and more difficult to sustain that model. And I could see it coming, and I could see the mindset of those running it. There wasn't a reality check in saying we have to radically change what we're doing if we want to survive.
Tell me if you agree that there's a little bit of humor. It's like you had a really forward-looking idea, but it involved print, physical paper at a time where they were probably starting to figure out how they're going to live in a world of a more diverse ecosystem, media ecosystem with social and digital and selling ads across different platforms or whatever they were trying to figure out 10 years ago. And you're like, I've got the big idea. Did surfing teach you that, or was it that you had seen these communities surrounding golf and you're like, there's something deeper here that I think will involve a hard paper publication? How did you sync that up to know that community of people would be interested in something a little bit more storytelling and a little bit more beautiful, all the things that the Golfers Journal is now?
I think people do what they know. And I had, the output of our small editorial team at Surfer Magazine was insane. I think we did 19 issues a year, as well as a website and all the social media channels. And we had a staff of like 5 people. It was absolutely insane output. So I had refined my editorial brain to make, magazine stories and web stories and any other medium. So I had like a sort of irrational confidence in my ability to create editorial. But it's also what I knew, right? I knew how to make compelling pages that involved design and photography and all these other things. So really I was taking my unique set of like learned experiences and saying, well, this is what I know how to do well. And I see there's a gap, and obviously the addressable market is bigger in golf than it is in surfing. So that sort of calculus was going through my head. But when I eventually made the move over to the Surfers Journal to be publisher there, that was very intentional why I took that job. I wanted to learn the ins and outs of niche publishing and independent publishing, because that's the part I didn't have a lot of experience with. I had experience in kind of mass publishing, and the combination of me doing what I knew, as well as it was kind of an emergent thing that the journal kind of just took on this life of its own. But most media outlets they kind of hedge when they start. They start with something cheap or free, whether it's a podcast or a social media channel, build an audience, and then figure out how to monetize that audience. And at the time, there were a couple of these communities taking shape in golf, and I didn't want to be just one of those communities or one of those entities. Print was a way to be different, and it was kind of like a way to have people talk about you. It's like free marketing in a way. It's like, look at these crazy people starting a print publication in 2017. And even if it was like, what a bunch of idiots, at least they were talking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where it's like, okay, well, this will cut through the noise. And very few people are going to attempt this because it's really expensive to make a nice print publication. It's easy to make a cheap one. It's relatively inexpensive, but to make a nice one is expensive. So I didn't think we'd have a lot of competition in that space. And, looking at the breadth of magazines that were available back then, they had all fallen prey to the same, model where it's like, as many ads as we can put in the book is going to make us rich. So the end product was something that, even if it was nice paper and pretty well designed, it was still a majority advertising platform. So we were like, well, let's do this the other way around. And I think it obviously worked out really well in retrospect, but it was probably mainly because it's just what I knew.
We made a Challengers film with you a few years ago, and in that film, in addition, if anybody sees it, they can see what a heck of a surfer you are, which was bananas. I rewatched it this morning. But you mentioned that you knew Scotty Cameron, and that the early days involved, I think, you kind of pitching him on the crazy idea that you had. When you did that, were you wanting to pick his brain, or did you actually hope that maybe he'd be one of the handful of advertisers, because you have very limited advertising there? Or was it just like, hey, do you think this would work? What were you trying to accomplish by talking to him about your vision?
Yeah, a lot of credit has to go to Scotty. I mean, the guy really, kickstarted this thing. He gave me the push that I needed. But to back up a bit, I was when I was the editor of Surfer Magazine, he had his gallery that he was, he's got down in Encinitas, and my friend Rob Machado, who's a pro surfer, was making some surfboards for him to go in his gallery. So it was a really kind of interesting collab, I guess. And so Rob called me up and said, you should come see what I'm doing at this putter gallery. And I didn't know culturally, always been a fan of Scotty Cameron's. My dad, used to joke that, that's the only thing that won Masters or major championships was the Scotty Cameron. But so I went into this gallery, and it was like something I couldn't have comprehended before. It was, it was golf as art. The putters were just so over the top and so beautiful and so rare. And the whole place was just, every detail was thought down to the minuscule detail. But then Scotty, being the professional he is, he was like, well, I'm going to really earn this media. I'm going to take them and play golf with them this afternoon. And so we got to play golf with Scotty Cameron in my reporting on this thing for Surfer Magazine. So he took us to his club, the Bridges, and we, again, this is like one of these courses that you wouldn't otherwise get on. It's, exclusive and private and all the rest. And so really we felt like we were heroes. I showed up with my Odyssey putter, and the first thing Scotty did was he pulled it out the bag and threw it in the lake, and just was like, here, use one of my putters, I'll get you another one.
He threw it in the lake?
He threw it in the lake. So that was the end of that putter. We all had a good laugh about it. He said, don't worry, I'll replace it, but it won't be an Odyssey.
It's like, what if you had been like, that was my grandfather's? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Well, it was clearly not my grandfather's. It was
yeah, it's 2 years old. Yeah.
But, that whole scene, we just got along so well. We had so much fun, and we played golf a couple times. And this golf publication idea had been stewing for years. And I eventually called a meeting with him, and he said, he graciously took the meeting. And again, we sat for hours, and the stories he told me were, I mean, I was like, if we could just turn this into stories for mass consumption, people would love it. There's just incredible stories. So we sat for hours in his gallery, and he told me stories about his history. And ultimately he said, look, you just build it, they'll come. And I'm going to back you when you do it. So that was the sort of blessing that I got to go, okay, well, I've got one sponsor on board. Like, can I get any more? And I think, I don't know what it was, but he just saw something in me or in the idea, and he kind of worked behind the scenes to get Titleist on board.
And they've been involved since day one, right?
Day one, yeah. I mean, he was getting on a plane in Japan, and he just called my cell phone, and he's like, when's the magazine coming out? And I was like doing my own thing. I wasn't really thinking about making the golf magazine, but he basically told me, like, get going. I've given you my blessing. Like, you need to make it happen. And it was like this weird, like, pressure that came with that made me really commit to getting it off the ground.
I got to admit that at this point in the podcast, I've been a subscriber from the first episode. I think you're probably in the mid 30s at this point, over 7 or 8 years. And I don't even remember how I found out about it. How did you, so A, I want to know if you're surprised, and B, how did you get people to find out about it?
It was totally word of mouth. And it was interesting because the types of people that gravitated, we obviously position ourselves as this weird disruptor using this kind of anachronistic medium. So the people with large followings on social media and kind of existing audiences, they're obviously always looking for something that's newsworthy and interesting to talk about. And I think that was part of it. I think the first edition, we pre-sold about 500 subscriptions. So these people bought subscriptions without
before you'd made it? Before
ever seeing it, just based on hype kind of alone. And then when it came out, it took on a little kind of counterculture life of its own, in that there was, I keep saying, it looked like Fight Club. People would see the magazine and like give you a knowing nod because you were like, you knew what was up in golf. You were like on this kind of like cutting edge of being informed in what's happening in the golf space. So that kind of fueled interest, and people would post to social media to say, look how informed I am, look how cool I am, I've got this thing that no one else knows about, and all the rest of it. And I think that was the sort of organic start of it going viral, I guess.
Podcasts have popped up, clothing brands have popped up, your publications popped up, new different kinds of membership clubs have popped up for people. There's a whole universe now over the last, a little bit less than 10 years probably, that seems like it operates very different from all of the traditional things that used to exist, whether that was how you dress, how you belong to a community of people or to a club, how you get information, how we tell stories. What was going on in the golf world, or for that matter, in the world in general, that made room for things like the Golfer's Journal, but you could fill in the blank with apparel brands and lots of things? Is it just a natural shift that happens from going from a little bit older or long held ways to new ways of doing things, just like there are taxi cabs to Ubers? Or do you sense something else is going on that opened up the opportunity for people to want to hold up the Golfer's Journal on their social media and be like, look at this?
Look, a lot of it was luck. Timing wise, 2017 is a completely different world to 2021 post-COVID. So we were kind of established enough back then to kind of reap the rewards of the COVID boom. But we also did things that nobody else was doing. Like our tour, which we have north of 50 events a year now, like one a week if you count it out like that for our members. There wasn't anything like our tour at the time. And so when in 2019, I traded a Sprinter van with one of our sponsors, and we kind of skinned the thing, and it was ready to go out on the road because we wanted to go out and put on this little mini tour, which was I think 3 or 4 events at the time. And as soon as the van was ready to roll, COVID hit and we were locked down, and there was no going out in the world at all. And I think we waited about a month to see what was going on, and I'd already sunk like everything we had into the span. And I just said to
you were all in on the van right when COVID hit. Okay,
the van was the big expenditure for us. I think it was like $10,000 to deck the thing out, and for us that was an enormous amount of money. And I just said to Casey Bannon, who was our assistant editor at the time, I was like, buddy, I don't care what's going on in the world. You're getting in that van, you're driving across the country. We're having these events, no matter what. And he to his credit, didn't even flinch. He was like, yeah, okay.
Of course, I'm driving the van despite the world being shut down and we have no idea what's happening.
Yeah,
Okay.
so he took off on these like kind of empty highways, across the country. And I think people were just like starving for connection and starving for things to do. And I mean, so much of that's just about timing, right? And our community, the people who subscribe to our magazine, just came out in their droves to support us and wanted to hang out and talk to Casey and talk to each other and go play golf together.
Check out the van.
Yeah, and check out the van. And that was our next viral moment. In the beginning, it was people posting photos of their broken tees from playing all these awesome golf courses all over the world. But then the COVID era was like, hey, I spotted the van out in the wild, and here it is. It's like, it's in this, this random town.
Yeah, it's like seeing the Oscar Mayer mobile somewhere in America. Yeah,
exactly. And, we then took that kind of as a feedback. That feedback loop was so strong that people wanted to get together, and the type of people that were attracted to our publication and our version of golf were awesome. And they all got along really well and they were respectful of the game. So we put on some events at some golf courses, and the golf courses would be like, wow, we have never had a group that's that knowledgeable, that respectful, of the property. You can come back whenever you want. And then as that went on, word got out, and these really top tier private clubs would say, hey, if you want to come and have an outing here, we'd be happy to host you. I was like, wait, that's ridiculous. I can't believe I didn't even think we'd be able to cover this place editorially. And before you know it, we were hosting events there. And, thousands of our members were signing up into the lottery to get into the event. And we learned our lesson. The website would crash and it was chaos. But those that got into the event felt like they'd really won something meaningful. The interactions were incredible. And then from there, our kind of reputation grew. So we've made it a point of like providing the best possible experiences for our membership, being the best possible partner to these golf courses who host us. And we've seen just competitors pop up everywhere who have seen the success of that and maybe wondered how we pulled it off. And we've normalized that in a way that now some of these, clubs say, okay, we've got 4 or 5 outings a year. This is how we're going to let people come into our club. So competitors have popped up in both the media editorial space as well as the event space. And then there's also, apparel brands who are following the same sort of model. They're going, okay, well, every brand is really a media brand now. They have to put out endless media. And, so we feel like we're being chased down by everyone all the time, And so that's become we went from being very disruptive and a disruptor to sort of being like being
the hunted now.
The hunted, yeah. And we're now, instead of reporting on the culture, we're somewhat defining the culture. And so there's been a mindset shift that we've had to undergo over the last, couple of years.
I'm sure. And 2017 doesn't sound like that long ago, but for the things that you're talking about, it's an eternity. So getting ahead of how you run events, the websites, social content, marrying your ecosystem of things. I mean, that is a long time for someone to play catch up on in the space, though they will. That's the natural course of competition. So hopefully everybody that's listening to this podcast will grab a copy of the publication. But if they don't, I can say they're stunningly beautiful. The photography, the writing, how they're laid out, the color choices for the spine. I mean, everything is really thoughtfully done. But one of the things that's interesting about it is you hold your advertisers also to that standard. And I don't know the specifics of that or how you do it, but it's certainly noticeable as a reader. You can look and the ads do not look like the ads that these brands, these brands would put in another place. So they have to be environmentally aware and look like they're part of the same craft and care. Is that a difficult conversation, or have you had any where someone, you don't have to name the brands, but someone's sent you the ad and you're like, oh man, we're going to need to have a tough conversation with these guys? Has that happened? Because it's really cool. I mean, people don't understand that. Like, if I use a different example, if you were watching Curb Your Enthusiasm or Seinfeld and someone said the ads running on TV when you're watching Ted Lasso, it's not advertising supported, but you get the point, have to be just as funny as Seinfeld, imagine how good the ads would be. And so in the print world, you've almost created a standard of excellence for these ads that they have to at least be somewhat close to how much care you put into photography. So that's a long way to ask you that question, though. Have you had any tough conversations, or does that get harder if you think about a new advertiser and you have to have a tough conversation like, hey, just so you know, don't send us crap or something like that?
Yeah. That was easily the most difficult conversation I had in the beginning. I'm not a natural salesman. So getting the sponsors on board in the first place was like a crowning achievement in my life, like able to convince 6 companies to give me money for something that didn't yet exist was a big lift. And then the ads showed up. And I was like, well, this is not going to work. We didn't want like laser beams and starbursts and extra 50 yards distance and all this stuff in the magazine. So I had to get the creative, and I had to call them up and say, like, look, this is not this type of publication, And then luckily
they're already like, dude, we're buying ads and you don't even have a magazine yet. It's like, what? Now you're telling me my ads aren't good enough?
Yeah. Thankfully, there was some kind of undercurrent in all these brands that we worked with. The fact that they were backing this idea, there was an undercurrent of like understanding what it is we're trying to achieve, and that they felt like something needed to be different. And they actually, benefited from us explaining what it was that we're trying to do and what it should look like, and the type of photography we were going to run. And a lot of the studio photography they had was not in that ilk, So it was quite difficult initially, but we were able to, with some very creative people at all these brands, get things that were pretty spot on. They were exactly in line aesthetically and philosophically with what we were trying to accomplish.
Well, that's a great message for all the marketers and advertisers out there, of which I'm one, but that is that being environmentally aware, being contextually aware, and potentially even being more thoughtful and embracing the craft can have great dividends for you. So I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, looking forward. So 8 years have gone by pretty quickly. You now have a publication. You have a lot of members to the Broken Tea Society. You sell merch. You have podcasts. I'm sure I'm forgetting things, but you've created quite a media, event, merch ecosystem. Now, I'm assuming you always have a set of challenges. They might be a little bit different now. You talked about competitors. Like when you look into the future, what does it look like for the business and for growing, or what? I don't want to put words in your mouth. What's the next hill to climb other than keeping competitors out of some of these spaces as everybody chases your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main goal is to kind of deepen the connection with our existing members to the brand and to the experiences we create. We launched an app this year, which is a private member community for all the Broken Tea Society members. And the Broken Tea Society is just the name we've given the membership of the subscribers to the Golfers Journal. Again, that was an emergent thing where somebody posted their broken tea from St. Andrews and hashtag Broken Tea Society, and we just kind of like ran with that. But really deepening that connection so when people sign up or subscribe to the journal, there's now people who think of it as a membership, a sort of decentralized membership that they're signing up to. And a benefit of that is getting the print publication or getting whatever else we're offering. So even the perception of what we are has shifted. So our main goal right now is to kind of deepen that relationship and, let the product itself do the talking for us. We've kind of run word of mouth for 8 years. And it's limited probably our growth and like who we could reach, but we're finding the right people. It's obviously this insanely engaged group of golfers who love everything about the game and just want to consume media and go and have these experiences. So our goal is to deepen that connection. We want to have as many members as possible show up at the event and experience it, meet people, connect through our app, go play golf with one another. We have an apparel business for Broken Tea Society, and we've got a big launch coming out next year. We've been doing that for years, but now it's like kind of we're throwing our full weight behind it because again, we've now got enough of a relationship and a conversation going with our members, tens of thousands of them, that we feel like we have an insight into what golfers really want, and we're going to keep providing solutions for them. If golfers really want to get together and play golf, and we make events, and golfers really wants a different type of apparel or accessory, we'll go make it. So we've got into all these different things where they were so far removed from just telling stories about golf but we're a bunch of golf sickos. So we're living all this ourselves. And I mean, as much fun as we're having doing it, it seems like every time we undertake one of these, big projects or a new business per se, we have a ton of fun doing it. And so while we're having fun, we might as well keep it rolling.
That's incredible. When you think about golf in general, however we want to define that, what are some of the things that you're excited about, or what gives you optimism and excitement about golf and where it could be headed into the future?
Well, similar to when I started the Golfer's Journal, there was a sort of movement in surfing that was kind of appreciating the craftsmanship of, creating surfboards that were unique. It wasn't always about cutting edge, high performance. There was a sort of like an undercurrent of like this sort of retro thing going on. And I think culturally, as we're getting more brain rot from scrolling social media, AI is taking over so much of the digital media that's showing up. I think there is going to be a shift towards like real human in real life interaction and community, and obviously human-made content and real stories about adventure and golf. So I think I'm optimistic about the fact that this niche that we've carved out for ourselves is actually going to endure and actually might even benefit from a bit of a tech backlash from all the stuff that we're consuming at the moment. I mean, I'm the first to admit I'm one of them, struggling with all the problems of social media and brain rot. I justify it by saying I need to be on it for my work.
For work, I have to. Yeah, sure.
But I do sense there's a sort of the same undercurrent that like has, for instance, like people are drinking less alcohol than they used to. There's the same sort of shift towards sort of an antipathy towards, AI and social media and all that stuff. I think I'm positioning the Broken Tea Society to be the place where people come and get that. So it's not necessarily about reading the book and having this beautiful coffee table book in your office or a living room. That's more a kind of signifier that you're in the club. There's still the digital element of how you can communicate with one another, but then there's these in real life experiences that we want to foster and bring people together. So I think that's what's like I'm really optimistic about as far as where we're positioned. And then, the fact that we are still pretty underground, we still kind of get, a knowing nod when Broken Tea is on a bag or something. And we see that on social media. And we hear it from our members. So I think we've got a lot of room to grow, more golfers to bring in, but we want to do that carefully. We're not out there just, trying to get 1 million golfers into the community. We really want to like stay true to our roots and attract the right type of person.
I love it. Well, yes, please keep doing what you're doing. And I know you're busy. Thank you for joining us. But hey, you know what? It was like 45 minutes you weren't on your phone. So that's we're manifesting these changes we want to see in the world. So, Brendon, thanks so much. Appreciate all of it. And appreciate all that your team does. I know it's not just you. There's a whole group of people still driving the van and many other things that are really contributing to positive momentum in the world of golf. So, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, Mason. Appreciate it.
So that's it for us today. Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about the Golfer's Journal, Broken Tea Society, and the work Brendon does, you can check it out at golfersjournal.com. And I've got a link to it in the show notes as well. On Instagram and X, their handle is @GolfersJournal. For all of Schwab's golf content, including our films, tournament news, and promotions, check out schwabgolf.com. If you've enjoyed the show, which we hope you did, we'd be really grateful if you'd leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, a rating on Spotify, or feedback wherever you listen. For important disclosures, see the show notes or schwab.com/thegame.